You are now listening to the Youth Fusion Radio Hour.
Hello guys! Welcome back to the Youth Fusion Radio Hour. Now that we did our first recorded podcast, we decided that we're experts and we're going to look into more of how to do a podcast with you. We went through this once, so that, like I said, makes us experts for the entire process. Indeed, as I said last time, or I guess Gabby said last time, it seems really scary and huge at first, but once you get into the flow, it's really fun. Really fun, I promise. So today's episode is how to create a podcast.
All right, wait, Brittany. From last time, you and Marie did two truths and a lie, so let's get the answers for our audience.
Yeah, that's true. You guys burned me on the spot, right? I do not have 100 selfie on my phone. Brittany, what was yours?
I knew you didn't have 100 selfies. I knew it. All right, guys. So yeah, I guess it's true story. My sister really did bring a python home for Christmas last Christmas. I guess she was snake sitting for one of her friends that had to fly away.
Did the snake participate in Christmas festivities?
No, my mom wouldn't let it come out of her room because she thought it was gonna scare away the guests. Yeah. All right, guys. Anyways, my other story of lake sharks are also true. No, lake sharks are not real, but I was working at a camp where I somehow had a radiator fall onto my foot on one of my days off. Very complicated, horrific story. But I had to get stitches, and I couldn't, I was a lifeguard, and I couldn't swim/lifeguard for 2 weeks at camp, and they must have really liked me to keep me employed. But yeah, basically I told all my kids, they're like, what happened? I was like, a lake shark named Radiator bit my foot. And some of these kids definitely believed me and wrote home to their parents about it when they were explaining about lake sharks, and I thought it was really funny. I got a kick out of it. Anyway, so that leaves my last lie, I guess, which is I'm not a super ninja. I've never been in the military, and I can't do hand-to-hand combat, but I wish I could. However, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the youth in Namiska can definitely vouch for my awesomeness. So I guess that's my truth and a lie.
Okay, wait, Brittany. You guys may have heard just before a little voice chime in with a question. So actually that new voice is a new host. Annie, she is starting on our podcast. So Annie, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm the little voice. Thank you guys for including me in this project. I'm really excited to be here. For everyone listening, I am a Science of the Land project coordinator for Youth Fusion. I've worked in Kudrorapik and Kangersuyuak, and right now I'm working from home in Rossland, BC. Some things about me: I love marine mammals, any of them. Making lists and having conversations about books, even if they're books I haven't read yet, because then I can add them to my list of books.
Oh.
Yeah. And I also, you guys have been playing Two Truths and a Lie, so I came up with my own contribution to the game. So please try to guess which of these things is the lie, and I'll get back to you on that next time. So number 1, I love fair rides that spin. Pretty self-explanatory. Number 2, our family dog is named Princess Macadamia Nut. And number 3, I have seen a flying squirrel in the wild. So guess which one is not true.
I really hope Princess Macadamia Nut's true, because I think that's an awesome name for a dog.
You are listening to the Youth Fusion Radio Hour.
All right, well, welcome, Annie. So we can start now about the serious discussion on how to make a podcast. it's very serious. This is serious business matter right now. So I think first it's important to discuss what's a podcast, because some of you may not know. Well, you're listening to our podcast, so you may have like a slight idea of what it is. But I'm going to be honest with you. My friends started to say that they were listening to podcasts. Like usually it was stuff about like self-help and psychology. And I thought that was like something all like nerdy and cool people were doing. Well, look at me now. I've subscribed to like at least 5 podcasts. I'm just trying to limit myself because I listen to podcasts at least 2 hours a day. I think I like podcasts better than the radio because it's very focused on a theme, and like the radio, you just get what's there. You know, there's a lot of things happening. Whereas when you open your podcast, you know exactly where you're going to listen. They're usually about a topic. And I don't know if you remember, but our podcast is about leadership and healthy living. Personally, I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts and political podcasts. But there's so many stuff out there. You have to find something that suits you. And if you don't, maybe it's a sign that you should make your own podcast, right? So like I said, it could be about anything. I know there is like science fun facts. I'm sure, Annie, you can find about something about marine mammals podcast, yeah. There are podcasts about sports, hockey, there's stuff about mysteries, religion, well, about anything you want is out there for sure.
That's really interesting that you guys are going to find me a marine mammal podcast now. But like, I mostly listen to podcasts about like pop culture because I never know what's going on, but I like to be in the loop. So it's a good way for me to know what's on TV without watching all the shows. I am completely new to this. This is my first podcast ever. What's really cool about it is you really don't need much equipment to make a podcast. We've been using Zoom to do it because there are recording options. So you can record the audio and you can even keep the video if you want. You can download the app on your computer or on your phone. And you can even use the voice memo app on your phone to make a podcast, which I didn't know about, but that seems super, super simple. And I think that's the key, simplicity. Keeping it really simple the first time you make a podcast is the way to go, because then when you go to edit, it's going to make things easier. Marie's been doing the editing for us. Keeping things as straightforward as possible your first time will make things easier in the long run. A little bit about the process. I've been introduced to this week. So each week we start by picking a subject. We use a shared document to work on a script together. And then we all get together virtually via Zoom to record the podcast together. And the big takeaway is to keep it simple and have fun and try things out, because you never know what's going to work.
Nice. Well, anyways, I got to the point of what kind of equipment you could use. So Marie could probably speak more to this, but I know that there are more than a few editing programs you could use to actually edit your podcast. The one that I'm most familiar with is actually called Anchor. When you Google search it, the web address will be like anchor.fm or something. So if you want to check that out, that's what you should be looking for. It's free on your phone and on the web. I tried actually using it for a different podcast I'm trying to make. Like I said, I suck at using any type of technology, and this stuff was really easy. So yeah, Marie, what did you use to edit our podcast?
Well, I use Audacity, which is also free and very simple. Edit sounds. And you will need to do some editing, like no question asked, even especially if you do this with some other people. Sometimes it's just because also your brother or sister just popped in there and yell at you, and you don't want to hear your silent fans to hear it. So that's why you will need to do the editing.
Yeah. So this week we had the chance to interview Nick Wapashi. Is a citizen of the Nemaskau community. He's now living in Mississippi, but he has his own podcast, and he has been willing to share his story and some tips with you guys. So if you want to listen to the interview, you'll have access to it on SoundCloud. He's also the one who helped us starting our own podcast.
Okay, that's great. I can't wait to hear it on the SoundCloud. Thank you so much, Gabby.
Wajega imse iut gemagenzit gedigedwenche cabbage betodo. Nico Patchinson gason ide nemskayugani hudemuga hems tesnigdeka danjish megotsigde tabitsa. Shisha he nge debajmunga tiga betonon den hade wemstuk shwimian he debajum swanga utna hade he danga ihtianga ude udatso. Doaptigan city abitstanga GGB debitana yo. The badgemon ek just snoite again hen had got the beat there with and had in EUSGT some gadelga. Eskegin shinga de deskutugan den had eskutugajin deno. Ek eskenden had ni stamsken getana he beat there with and get to goyo. Ek egmagen heb shisha he the badgem swanga. Ek go jim he guy Gabriel you had the badgemiat. Egmak tian.
So much awesome information there. Yeah, I guess if you want to check out the interview by itself, you can also go to our Facebook page at Youth Fusion Indigenous Youth Community. Yeah, I guess I also just wanted to jump in and say that I think the most important thing about making a podcast is having fun. We have fun. I like doing this. I like it. So yeah, I also hope you guys have fun listening to us. Moving on to some more fun stuff. It's Guess the Word trivia time.
This week, I scoured the internet for words that sounded fun or had fun meanings or could be turned into a game. And this is what I came up with, so don't judge me too harshly for it. But my trivia question for you this week is, if I were a person with compoundophobia, which movie would I not watch? So which of the following movies would scare me the most if I had compoundophobia? Is it Coraline, which for those of you who haven't seen Coraline is about a little girl who sort of travels to an alternative world where all of the people in her life have eyes made of buttons, because compoundophobia could be a fear of buttons. Number 2, is it Up, because compoundophobia is a fear of balloons? Or is it number 3, Wreck-It Ralph, because compoundophobia is a fear of video games? So what kind of phobia do you think compoundophobia is? Let me know. Think about it in your head.
That's so hard. Like, they all sound so right.
Oh, I have a big word. All right. So this is one of the biggest words in the English dictionary, and I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it, so I'm going to try my hardest. Maybe you guys can also try to pronounce it, and then we'll guess it like together. So it's hippopotamonstrosesquiaphodia. I don't know.
Can I try saying it?
Yeah.
Hippopotamonstrosiquipedaliophobia?
Yes.
Well, that was a lot better than mine.
And it's not very nice for all our friends there who are actually afraid of long words.
But how mean is that? Like, whoever was naming it was like, let's make this doubly awful for people who have this phobia.
Oh, by the way, did we tell you that you're listening to the Youth Fusion Radio Hour? If so, now you know.
All right, so we're going to move back actually into our conversational podcasts. We wanted to maybe share some of our favorite podcasts that we listen to, or ones we thought might be interesting for you guys to listen to if you want to branch out and listen to different podcasts. But also just in terms of recording your podcast, your own podcast, if you don't want to read articles, you could also watch YouTube videos about how to record a podcast and how to properly record one. I literally fell into a black hole of YouTube videos just looking at content of tips and tricks of how to record, / like what mistakes to avoid as well. So there are some popular podcasters who create these videos for you, so they actually know what they're saying. And you can find out so much on the internet about podcasts in general because they've been actually around since 2004. So I actually found this fact on a website called How Stuff Works. It is actually the source of my favorite podcast called Stuff You Should Know. It's the first podcast I've ever listened to, and I've been listening to it for now like 3 years. And they also have this How Stuff Works website, has a variety of podcasts. One that might be interesting for teenagers is one that is called What I Missed from History Class. So it's just like random historical facts and whatnot. It's really good too. But just kind of leading into more youth-led podcasts, I came upon one called Teenager Therapy. Don't let the name discourage you from listening to it. It's not about a therapist, or it's not a therapist talking. It's literally 5 teenagers. I think they're like 15, 16. They live in California, and they pretty much just talk about their troubles or teenager troubles. Their catchphrase is because we have problems too, in reference to teenagers. We have all been teenagers, the 4 of us hosts, so we know what it's like. And actually, when I was listening to this podcast, I wish I listened to it as a teenager rather than an adult, because it would have been super useful. They actually get into different topics. It's hard to be social, no plans for the future, and also like acne, skincare routines. They also do talk about depression and some more serious topics, of course. So just be aware of what you're listening to. But yeah, so I totally recommend this podcast. I've been listening to it as an adult now, just listening to what teenagers are going through now. And it's the same thing that I went through as a teenager. Again, there's not a therapist talking, but it is quite therapeutic listening to it, because you know that other teenagers are going through the same thing you are. So again, it's called Teenager Therapy.
All right, guys. So the podcast that I picked this week to talk about is called the Who Would Win podcast, dramatic music effect. Obviously, I picked my podcast for my nerdy superhero obsession. But yeah, it's about who would win an epic superhero showdown. The hosts, James and Ray, debate the strengths and abilities of their chosen weekly champions. So, like, each week they have like 2 new champions, and they each have 6 rules about who would win this non-existent showdown of all time. So I guess the basic rules are like 1, each debater would make 3 main points. 2, the who would win match is a random encounter in a neutral location where neither combatant necessarily knows anything about their opponent or has any time to prepare for the battle. And I guess the rule number 6, jumping to 6, the winner of who would win debate is whomever the judge decides has the best ability to incapacitate their opponent to a degree where they can safely walk away, no longer having a threat present. Anyways, so this includes completely destroying their opponent, removing them from the battlefield, restraining them, or knocking them out. The who would win battles are not necessarily death matches. But yeah, basically, every week, new judge, he decides the winner off of this huge debate. It's actually really, really cool. I listened to one of their older episodes this week to like refresh my brain, and it was Storm of the X-Men versus Aang, the Last Airbender.
Yes.
Yeah, I really like this episode because I like both of these characters. Anyway, so I like this debate. I was like team both characters, but they were actually really evenly matched. I'm not going to tell you guys who won because I'm not going to spoil the episode, but there was a huge debate whether they could actually like both manipulate the elements or if they could create it, because then they were like, oh, at a molecular level, Storm can like manipulate elements, but they're like, Aang can create them, and they're like, no, he can't, and they're like, yeah, he can, and it just went on. Super, super fun. I highly recommend all of you superhero fans give it a listen.
Okay, so for this week I checked out a podcast called Youth Express, and it's a podcast made from a live radio show that's broadcast out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So it's a lot of American teens talking about their lives. And what I found really cool about this podcast is that when I listened to it, I hardly heard any adult voices. Like, this podcast isn't adults being relatable to the young people. This podcast is for youth, and it's by youth, so you hear youth voices the whole time, and you hear youth writing, music, and just conversation. So there were poems and stories and experiences and opinions that all came from the youth on the show. And it's not just stuff that is only interesting to youth. It's the topics that are covered are important to everyone. So they talk about current events and identity, even video games, like you name it. So I listened to a bunch of episodes, and one that I really liked was season 3, episode 10. And on this episode were featured high school students who were sharing their stories of immigrating to the United States from their respective countries. There was a student from Nigeria, one from Iraq, and one from Rwanda. And they shared their stories, and they were able to compare experiences and find common ground, even though they came from such different places. And then the second part of this episode touched on identity and mental health and the intersectionality of identity and mental health. And I thought it was just a really great episode. So this podcast lets youth pick the topics that are important to them and then gives them exclusive control of the microphone. I thought it was great.
Yeah, that sounds
good.
That sounds great. That's exactly what I've been listening to, actually. That was a podcast that was recommended by a coworker. It's called New Fire. It's a CBC radio podcast. It has been over for a few years now, but I think it's always interesting to dig into the past. So the host is Lisa Shirley Boy. I don't know how old she is, but she's like probably like either a late teenager or a young adult. She's giving voice to young Indigenous people all over Canada, and I really like that podcast. The youth she invites are very inspiring guests. Like, they have great story to tell. Her subjects, the topics she has are like about education, cultural appropriation, rebellion, like we have all been through this, social medias, music, and honestly, there's never a dull moment listening to her and the guests she has. For this episode, like for our podcast episode, I really listened to some of the episodes to just refresh my mind. And the one that I liked the most, I think, was the one called Brushes with Boredom. I think it's interesting to listen to this episode right now during the pandemic and everything. The first guest is a youth that gets really sick, and she has to stay at the hospital because of her illness. And like, she sees all of her cousins being outside, having fun, people going to school, and she can't do any of this. And the way she finds a way out of boredom, because she has to stay like every day in bed, is like with her grandparents, like her grandmother and her what she calls her grandparents, like great uncle and everybody. They visit her. It gave her a chance to really reconnect with her culture, learning about traditional medicines. So I think this giving me the best takeaway, because she says that boredom is about learning to change your perspective. It can actually help you develop yourself as a person. There's nothing left at that moment but to learn about yourself and expand your mind. And I think this is very true. So this was my podcast suggestion. So I think we've all talked and shared about our favorite podcast. Before closing the podcast, I think we, and by we I mean also our listeners, that we all want to know the answer to your trivia questions. What is the fear of somebody with kumpunophobia? Enlighten us.
Yeah.
What movie should they not watch?
Okay, so just as a refresher, our options were Coraline, because it's a fear of buttons, Up, because it's a fear of balloons, and Wreck-It Ralph, because it's a fear of video games. And is Coraline, because kumpunophobia is a fear of buttons.
Well, anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening on week 2. Full disclosure, it's week 2. Maybe you could still tell, but we had a lot of fun doing this, and we hope you had a lot of fun listening. Stay tuned for our next episode coming soon. Can't tell you when. Also can't tell you what it's going to be about yet, but stay tuned. Have a great day, a great week. Be grateful for all things. Remember to say I love you to someone. Stole that from Marie.
Yeah, and also if you decide to make a podcast with your class or your friends, let us know. Maybe we can help you out.
Yeah, and let us know. Like I said earlier, Fusion created a Facebook page. where we'll be posting our new podcast. So let us know at Youth Fusion Indigenous Youth Community what you'd like to talk about next. And thank you to all of our listeners out there.